Hey Defenders, welcome back. So in the last combination of videos, we've focused on Wazoo, Elasticsearch, and Kibana being our main SIEM solution, which is great. We need a SIEM to store all of the alerts that are coming in. However, we're not providing our team members to collaborate and open cases based on alerts, sift through alerts that actually need human interaction and not something that may be false positives that we can tune out. And so we need a way to track alerts over time to allow our team members to communicate and collaborate and add artifacts to alerts so that we can stay better organized and we're able to react to alerts a lot faster. And that's where a security operations center comes in, or a SOC. I also refer to it as a SOC. And what this will do is solve those issues for us. So now within Kibana, right, we're getting just dumped with alerts, and manually asking someone to sift through all those alerts to pick out ones that may be of more importance than others is kind of finding a needle in a haystack. I think, right? It's very difficult to do that and can become quite an eyesore. So we also don't have the ability to, add comments to alerts or add artifacts to alerts or be able to see what someone else is working on at the same time, right? So your team could be wasting time on alert comes in and then all of a sudden 3 people are looking at it at once, where really it only needs one person to look at it. And then if they need help or the alert needs to be escalated, then a proper workflow can be started from there. And so that's what we're looking to solve with the Security Operations Center. And so a little bit of why. So as I've foreshadowed to, collaboration is a big part. We can now seamlessly communicate and resolve alerts that occur within the network. We're much more organized, so we can see who has worked on what, the current status of an alert, whether it be resolved or if it's still open, the steps that were taken to resolve the alert. And we can also collect artifacts. So we can add artifacts such as IPs, file hashes, domains, and much more to see what triggered the alert. And we can then use those artifacts to say, okay, such as, let's say an IP address is triggering a lot of alerts, particular IP address. We can see, is this IP address also responsible for a lot of other alerts, right? And we can do our triaging from there. And also speed. So we can quickly resolve alerts, shift out the noise, and work together with ease. And so the tool that will do this is called TheHive. They are a scalable open source solution that provides a security incident response platform. And the 3 big topics we'll get to do with TheHive, and what makes it very powerful, is we can collaborate, we can elaborate, and we can also analyze artifacts that are brought in with the alerts. So the structure for the demo here, I have a CentOS VM set up. We're going to install Cassandra, which is a database and serves as a backend for TheHive. We're going to store our data indexes. So we're going to create a folder to store host indexes. TheHive writes to indexes. File storage, so we can upload files to TheHive. So we need to tell TheHive where to store those files, either locally or on a Hadoop cluster. In this demo, we're going to do a local file storage. And then we're going to install and configure TheHive, and then we're going to go through a first-time login and case creation. So let's go ahead and jump into that. And all right, so the guys at behind TheHive have also created a documentation page, which works pretty well. I'll paste the URL to this in the description below, so if you want to follow along, you can go ahead and check that out. And we're going to go ahead and run through these as well. So we're first going to install a JVM onto my CentOS box. If I can copy and move over without losing it. There we go. All right, so we're installing a Java virtual machine, which is using Java 8. We will set our environment variables here with these two commands, so pretty easy. And now let's install Cassandra. So we need to first enable the Cassandra repo. So I will actually go ahead and copy and create this repo here. So now we'll be able to just do a yum install of Cassandra. And again, this is the backend database that TheHive will write to. And then we'll need to make a few config tweaks so that we can create a Cassandra cluster and enable the Hive to write to it. And alright, so Cassandra has been installed. Alright, and then we need to start running Cassandra with our service Cassandra start. Alright, and now let's see, we should have Cassandra port listening of 9042. That looks good. Alright, so we'll go ahead and copy this command to interact with Cassandra so we can set our cluster name. And no appropriate Python interpreter found. Okay. Let me see what version of Python. Like 2.7. Okay, so I'll do a yum install Python 2-y. Alright, and then if we try that again. Okay, good. Alright, so we're now interacting with Cassandra. So that's good. And we will go ahead and run this update command here. And then we're going to exit and then just do a node tool flush. So that's all we need to do for that. And that looks good. And now let's edit the Cassandra YAML file here. Edit the default Cassandra YAML file that we have here and make the changes here. Okay, so the cluster name I'll say as THP. So again, following what we see on the left here. So I'm giving it a cluster name. Let me copy the IP address again. Alright, and let's find the listen address that we have to set. Okay, so we're specifying localhost, but we'll just manually input our IP address here. And then our PC address is here. So let's replace that with our IP address. And the seed provider, that's the last one we need to change. So if we scroll down here, and the seeds, again, we'll just point to our IP address. Or if you're clustering the Cassandra database, you could add multiple within here as well, right? But in this demo, we're just standing up one instance of it. Okay, so that looks good. And now let's try our daemon reload, and let's try our Cassandra start again. And let's see if that looks any better. Okay, it's running, so that's better. Let's list our listening ports here just to make sure. And okay, good. So we see Cassandra is now listening on our interface here that we have assigned to the server, and port 9042. So that looks good. Okay, now let's go ahead and create a new directory where we're going to have the host indexes for the Hive logged to, right? So I'll go ahead and just make this directory here. No such file. Oh, actually, you know, what we should do is we will come back to this after we install the Hive, because then when I try to change the ownership of this directory to the Hive user, that doesn't exist yet, so it'll complain at me there too. So we'll skip that for now and we'll come back to that in a sec. But let's go ahead and make this directory. So for the file storage, again, how I mentioned that we can upload files to the Hive, and this is telling the Hive where to store. So here I'm just going to store the files on a local file system. You have a few other options. For a standalone server, they recommend just a local file system, but you can also cluster the Hive, which we will explore in future videos. And if you cluster Hive, they recommend using a Hadoop solution to store files. So all servers within the Hive cluster have access to this Hadoop file storage. But in this example, we're just going to do the file storage here. So we've created our directory, but again, we haven't installed the Hive yet, so this user account of the Hive won't exist yet, so we'll come back to this step right after we install the Hive as well. Alright, but now let's actually install the Hive. So I will create this repo again, and we will point to this guy and save that, and we're going to install the Hive 4. So we run that there, and that will use the repo that we just created to grab all the contents that make up the Hive. Looks good, and now we can create the local file system here. So we can create this new directory, and we can make sure we change the ownership of that directory to there. And the indexing engine, let's also do that. So let's create. Oh, and actually I totally missed this GPG check failed. Okay, let me, sorry about that. But did it install? No, it didn't. Okay. Yeah, sorry about that. So let me blow away these directories I just created. I guess I should read the output first before totally moving on. That would probably help. Alright, so let's try that yum install again. I'll just do a no GPG check so that it skips that, and then we should successfully install it now. Cool, so now we should now have that Hive user added to the box here. So again, let's do the indexing engine. So we'll go back to those steps that we skipped over. Oh, it already exists. Okay, cool. So now let's change the ownership of that, and there we go. We don't get the error anymore, so the user exists. So that's good. Let's also create this local file system directory. So we created that, and then we'll change the ownership of that directory just to the Hive. So that looks good. And now we need to make a few tweaks within the Hive configuration. So we've installed the Hive. The secret key, okay, yeah, that's fine. There's a secret. We don't have to do anything there. Let's make sure that that exists, I guess, though, so it doesn't give us any issues. If we go into secret.conf, okay, good. And now let's edit the Hive creates. So the Hive creates a directory within etc, the Hive, and then all of the configuration settings go into an application.conf file here. So let's go ahead and open that up, and here we'll have to make a few changes. So we're first going to specify the database that we're using, and this is where we come back to our Cassandra config, right? So let me so now we come back to our Cassandra config. I'll remove these slashes here. I will set the host name just to an IP, so which is 192.168.1.181. So again, this is the IP address of the server that's running Cassandra as well. The username and password we didn't create, so we can blow that away. And then here we're calling our cluster name, right, which is that THP that we specified during the Cassandra install. And then we have the key space as the Hive, right? So that looks good. We also need to do the indexes. So with the indexes, we're using the Lucene, right? So if we scroll down here, they already and that's already created for us, so that's good. We just needed to create the directory. So here you see we're pointing to the directory. You can also use Elasticsearch to do so. Again, if you're clustering the Hive, you could use something like Elasticsearch to store the indexes. And again, we'll take a look at that in future videos. So I'm actually going to go ahead and just blow that away. And okay, that looks good. And then we also need to specify the file system, right? So we are going to use the local file system that we have here. And I will uncomment that, and then I will put the location, the directory that we just created a second ago, and then I can just leave that Hadoop stuff there, and we should be ready to run it now. So let's go ahead and go service TheHive start, and we can tail the application log. So I go into var log TheHive, and there's an application.log. So let's go ahead and tail this guy and make sure everything starts up accordingly. Alright, and as we can see, the Hive has started up and is now listening on port 9000. So now with our web browser, we can go ahead and point to the Hive. And it will be HTTP, so I'm not using HTTPS. As of now, you could stand this up behind a reverse proxy, for example, enable HTTPS that way. And all right, so now we need to log in. So if we go back to the guide here, we create a default admin user account. And well, let me go back, and it should give us the default admin user. So we see admin at thehive.local. So we'll use that and the password as secret to initially log in. And we can get away from the logs for now, so I'll just increase this. So of course, first things first, we want to change the username, or sorry, the password of the admin user. So I'll just change it to please subscribe. All right, and so that looks good. And what we first need to do is to create a new organization. And so these organizations will allow us to assign, we'll be able to assign users to organizations. So I'll just create a new organization. I'll just say demo. I'll just call it demo. I'll say demo org for the description. And we'll go ahead and save that. And now let's go ahead and bounce into the demo organization. And let's create a user from here. So I'll do a username. So I'll do info at name of please. And I'll do a name of please subscribe. And I'll do a profile. I'll make myself an org admin. And then you can see all permissions that this user will be able to do. So I'll save this user. I'll create a password for him. I'll just say demo for this purpose. And save that off, and now I'll be able to log. So this is all back-end admin administration stuff. We don't have the ability to create our cases or anything yet, and that's because we're just logged in as the admin. So now I need to log out and log in as this new user that has access to the demo organization. So let me select the logout. I will put in the info at opensecure.co. Password of demo, and we're now in. And here we see the UI is a little different now, right? So we see cases. Currently, we don't have any that have been open. Alerts, of course, are none as well. So let's go ahead and create a case. We'll say demo case. I'll set the date as now. And I'll do a description of demo case. So let's go ahead and create that. And now you can see our case has opened. So each case has a unique value, which it's given just a number, right? We can see the user who created it. we can see the user that created it, and because I put the name as please subscribe, that's what you see here. Details about the case that has been open, any tasks related to that case. So let's say, for example, I want to add a description. So description, I just have demo case, and I could say like taking a look. I could save that off. I can assign tasks to different people, right? So I could assign a task of like investigate IP, and I would say the task title would be, I'll just say demo case, that's fine, and save that off. And now we can, so within a case, I can have multiple people working on multiple tasks, right? So let's say I add another task, let's say investigate domain. I'll just put domain within here and select that. And so I've added now another task to it. So someone could, one of my team members could come into this case and say, okay, let me investigate the IP, and they could start that. And they could add a task log with their with their findings, any sharings that they want to do. And so I could add a task log, and I'll say please subscribe. And I will add that log. Again, actually, how you probably just saw, we can add an attachment, right? So any other observables, or maybe if we have a spreadsheet of other hosts that were affected by a particular alert, we can upload that here. So it's really powerful. We can add the sharing, of course. So I actually only have one organization. So if I had another organization, say it's like an ops team, for example, right there, that organization would show here. So I could say, hey, I want this other organization, being the ops team, to be able to view the task as well. So I can share it across organizations, which is really nice. So they don't necessarily have access to this particular organization, which would be like all of my security alerts. But if there's a task that I need them to do, I can assign it to them that way. And so that's really powerful as well. We can then come into here and we can see that the please subscribe user has started this case. So now another user can look at the same case and see and say, okay, the please subscribe user, or I'll say Bob. We'll say Bob is already investigating the IP address. Let me go ahead and investigate the domain. And now Bob would see that, okay, this new guy, we'll call him Steve. Steve has started to investigate this domain, and he can do his analysis. And now both of those tasks that two different people worked on that still involve the same case can now be solved, right? And so Bob could do his analysis, and if we go back into the case here, so now let's say I want to require an action. So let's require an action and add a log. So we could say block IP address, and let's go ahead and add that. So now you see that we have an action that needs to be taken, right? So we see the action, we need to block the IP address, and if we go back into our task here, we see that an action is required. So now I could share this with ops, or maybe my NetOps team. Maybe a security team doesn't have access to firewalls. I say, okay, I want to now share this task with the NetOps team so that they can blacklist an IP address on the firewall and do it that way. And then I can mark it as done. I'll say, yeah, sure, we'll add a log as complete. Or I'll say NetOps blocked IP. And we can add that log. And now let's go ahead and we can close this task, right? So now we see that the task has been closed of investigating IP, and we see that Steve has not started the task of investigating a domain yet, right? So Steve could then come in and go ahead and start, or maybe Bob, now has the time to. And we now see the investigate IP, right, as completed and closed out. But now we see that the investigate domain has just been started, right? And so now Steve and Bob can both work on on tasks that relate to a case. So now an alert comes in, and now I'm breaking up the alert kind of into two parts, right? So now two people can work on an alert at the same time, and they're not stepping on each other's toes either. We can also add observables, right? So how I was saying with observables, we can add these different types in, right? So we can add a domain, a file, IPs, mail subjects, registry, URLs, URI paths. So let's just add an IP, and we'll call it 8.8.8.8. And you can see there's also some other kind of metadata tags that we can fill out. So based on the severity, you can select a color to make it right, red being the highest. You can say, is this an indicator of compromise? So is this a known like malicious IP? Has it been cited with other cases? And then we can add a tag. So I can say like attacking IP. And let's go ahead and create this observable. And now you see the observable is added here. Let's say this IP address is associated with a known now domain. Now we could say the domain is like hacker.com. That's fine. Again, we still have our other metadata fields, and I'll add a tag as domain and create that observable. And now that's added to the case as well. And so now what's cool is that these observables are now added to these cases. And so what I can do is, let's go ahead and close this case out. If I try to close it out and this task has still not been completed, right, it gives me a warning of, hey, this task hasn't been completed. We can still close it if we want, but let's go ahead and make sure that this task has been completed. So I'll go ahead and close this out and make sure and state that it has been completed. So now we can go and select close. We then have the status, right? So it can be a true positive of, was this causing impact or not, false positive, or an intermediate, right? So I'll just close this out as a false positive and just say test and close that out. And now let's say we want to create a new case. I'll say just demo2 and then demo2 and create this case here. And let's add another observable of 8.8.8.8, which was an IP. And I'll just specify IP, create that observable. And now what we can do, create that observable. And now what we can do is we can select this guy and say, okay, has this been related to any other cases? And sure enough, we see, yep, and the observable is seen in one other case. So now we can start to correlate different observables, right? Whether that be files, IPs, domains, hashes, whatever the case may be. We can now see, okay, has this been seen in any other cases? And sure enough, we see that, oh, it has also been seen in case 1, which was the first one we created, right? So I'll go ahead and go back into case 2 here, select observables, go back again. We see, okay, this observable has been seen in one other case. And now, I'm not having to message another team member saying, hey, I saw this IP address create this alert. Have you seen this before? We now have that knowledge immediately, right? So we're now linking different cases. We're now linking observables within different cases together seamlessly and easily, right? And so I could then take, similar steps and do my analysis. And I could say, I'll close this. I could now close this out as, we'll just say false positive, and I'll say seen in case 1. And go ahead and close that case out. Another thing that's cool is you can open this new window here, and this is a live feed of events that are going on within the Hive, right? So we can see the case creations, the observable additions. So you could, kind of, if you're on a dedicated SOC team, you could pop this off into the corner and you can see cases come in, people create cases, people add their comments, whatever the case may be, all in real time, which is pretty cool as well. And you're not having to constantly refresh this. This window refreshes in real time for you. which is a nice addition. So, and now what I'll show in the next video is how we can run analysis on our observables, right? So it would be really nice if I could say at the click of a button, okay, bring me back the reputation of the IP address 8.8.8.8, right? And make various API calls like virus total, abuse IPDB, a MISP server, right? So it'd be really nice if I could say, hey, let's take the value of the observable, in this case 8.8.8.8, let's run it against all of these databases of IP reputation and have them give me the result of that. So then I could see, okay, is this IP address known to be abusing other organizations, or it has a reputation of being linked to malware, or whatever results come back. We'll now be able to see that report all within the Hive as well. So we make the life easier for your team to do quick analysis on the observables that are brought in as well. So, and we'll do that with a tool called Cortex. So stick around for the next video, and I will see you guys there.